Hey, everybody, it's Clint. I just wanted to take a quick second and say thank you all for being a part of Team Night Shift. You are fantastic. In just the last 3 weeks, we have tripled the size of this channel. I couldn't have done it without you. You're amazing. And thank you for all the words of kindness and encouragement. As I often say, this is a heavy lift to do every week. It's not my main job. This is purely a passion project. So it's great to know that there are so many other people out there as passionate about it as I am. And that's why this episode is so special, because this was an opportunity for me to sit down with legendary civil rights hero, attorney Daniel Sheehan, the man arguably closest to the center of this entire conversation right now. And I got to ask him some very direct, straightforward questions about what's happening, where we're going, how do we get there, and what can we all do to help. He is a scholar. He is a gentleman. I asked him for an hour. He gave me almost 2. He was very generous with his time. I can't thank Danny enough for sitting down to speak with me. I hope you enjoy the interview, and please let me know what you think in the comments. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing. Every little bit helps, and it's great to have you here. Thanks for being a part of Team Night Shift. Now enjoy the interview. Daniel Sheehan is a distinguished constitutional litigation and appellate attorney, having received his education from Harvard College, Harvard Law School, and Harvard Divinity School. With a career spanning nearly 5 decades, he has served as a federal civil rights attorney, author, public speaker, and educator. Sheehan's impactful work focuses on addressing global structural injustices, safeguarding fundamental human rights, and articulating an inspiring vision for the future of humanity. Throughout his extensive career, Sheehan has been at the forefront of pivotal legal cases and social movements, including the Pentagon Papers, Watergate, Silkwood, Greensboro Massacre, and Lapenka bombing cases, among others. In addition to his legal endeavors, Sheehan has been vocal on the topics of UFOs and alien visitation for decades. He has provided legal counsel for Harvard University psychiatrist John Mack and served as general counsel for Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project. Currently, he represents Luis Elizondo, the former director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Sheehan is also the founder of the New Paradigm Institute, which aims to promote the public release of government-held information on unidentified anomalous phenomena, commonly known as unidentified flying objects, or UFOs. Danny, thank you so much for being here and taking the time this afternoon to speak with me.
Terrific. It's my privilege, Clint.
It's a pleasure to have you. And for those of you, your professional accomplishments are well documented and well known, but I'm kind of interested in just getting to know Danny, the person, the human being, the man. For someone of your experience and skill set to be involved at such a high level in this conversation that's going on right now, as it picks up steam and speed, I have to ask, what was the moment that you decided to make this your fight and choose this as the path that you wanted to pursue?
Well, it was interesting, Clint, that I had been fascinated by this subject ever since I was very little, and when I realized what the stars were, that they weren't just twinkling lights up in the sky. I realized that when I was like 6 or 7 years old, that these were like suns of another solar system all throughout the universe, and that I was just completely convinced that there had to be people on the planets that were going around them. And so from the very beginning, I was originally planning to be an astronomer. And then I realized that it was much more interesting being an astronaut. And so I was going to be an astronaut. And I applied to the United States Air Force Academy coming out of high school. I was the #1 candidate out of New York State to get the senatorial appointment to the Air Force Academy so I could go there and become an astronaut. And when Jacob Javits, the United States Senator, was interviewing me for the senatorial appointment, he asked me why I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy. And I told him that I wanted to become an astronaut. And he said, oh, yes, 1963, all young men want to become an astronaut. He says, well, why do you want to become an astronaut? And I said, because, well, I said, look, we're right at this extraordinary point in our human family where we're going to be going out into the stars and meeting these other people from these other civilizations. And he said, you actually believe that there's other people on other planets? And I said, absolutely. I said, you're a United States Senator. I said, you must realize that too. And he was kind of flabbergasted. and actually went to the point of admitting to me that he had already given the appointment to the son of one of his major financial supporters. And he said, that's the way the real world is, but I'll give you the appointment to the Naval Academy. And I said, no, I'm not into boats, I'm into planes. And he said, no, you can fly in the Navy and you get to be an astronaut. I said, no, I said, I don't want to spend, the whole 4 years at the academy worrying about boats and ships. I said, I want to go to the Air Force Academy. So he said, okay, you can get the congressional appointment from your regular congressman. You don't have to have the senatorial appointment. And he said, so I'll just get a hold of your congressman and get him to give you the appointment. Well, the congressman gave the appointment to the son of the mayor of Glens Falls, where I was born, the Republican's mayor. And so I ended up going to Harvard College instead and studying foreign policy under Henry Kissinger and, sociology under David Reisman and, economics under John Kenneth Galbraith and all of that stuff. And then was the Rhodes Scholar nominee from Harvard College. But my draft board refused to let me go because I was 1A. And so I said, I'm not going to go do that. I mean, that whole war is completely illegal. And I'm going to go to Harvard Law School. So I went to Harvard Law School and co-founded the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review and started working from that point on. I had come to realize that the way Jacob Javits had conducted himself and the appointments and everything, that somehow the whole constitutional system that we were working with in our democracy was a little bit out of tune. And I would have to kind of become a lawyer to figure out how to help get this back in tune. And then I could get back on to my task of getting ready to become an astronaut. And I realized after a few years out in practice, I realized that our system wasn't just a little bit out of tune. It was playing an entirely different song than we'd been taught in high school civics and even at Harvard College and government studies. So I had to become more and more deeply involved. And so I was looking to find the right client to represent. And I went to the #1 corporate litigation law firm in the world, representing the New York Times. And that's where we did the Pentagon Papers case. And I initiated the case that established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources. So I developed a lot of really good friends in the investigative journalist community and started finding out more and more things, including the Pentagon Papers. And so we ended up representing the New York Times and getting the Pentagon Papers published. And I then went on to the #1 criminal defense firm in the country of F. Lee Bailey. And we represented James McCord in the Watergate burglary. And James McCord is the former CIA wiretapping specialist that was in the headquarters with the other burglars. And he's the one we got to actually blow the whistle on Richard Nixon and the White House plumbers unit. And I realized that neither one of those places, the major corporate firm or criminal defense firm, is where I really wanted to be. And so I ended up going back to Harvard to talk with the head, John Rawls, the head of the Department of Philosophy. And he had me come back to Harvard to do a master's work and then a PhD in comparative social ethics, comparing and contrasting how all these different worldviews were functioning at the same time. And so I ended up doing that, and I got recruited out of the Harvard Divinity School to become general counsel for the United States Jesuit headquarters in their social ministry office, dealing with public policy. And that's where, so I spent 20 years in Washington doing that. And we set up the Christic Institute to do litigation, to actually conduct professional investigations of major public policy challenges. And I was there at the Jesuit headquarters when I got contacted in 1977, early in 77, right after President Carter was elected in November of 76. And I got contacted by the director of the Congressional Research Service in the Science and Technology Division, Dr. Marshall Smith, who told me that President Carter had tasked the Congressional Research Service with doing a major investigation and study about the UFO phenomenon, because he had actually seen a UFO. And he had As soon as he was elected on November 2nd of 1976. And on the 19th of November, he invited George Bush, Sr., who was the director of the CIA at that time, previously appointed by President Ford, who took Richard Nixon's place when he resigned. So Bush refused to give him the information, said that he had no need to know, and he wasn't going to brief him on this. And so President Carter asked to have these studies done by the Congressional Research Service. And I was contacted by Dr. Marcia Smith and asked to become special counsel to that investigation. You might say, well, why did she contact you to do that? It was a much more narrow point. She wanted to see if I, as legal counsel at the Jesuit headquarters, could get at the Vatican archives to see if we could get access to the information that the Vatican had on the UFO phenomenon, in the existence of extraterrestrial life. And so I agreed to do that. And I got permission from the provincials here in the United States to do that. And but the archives would not give us that information. So I continued working on this. We went to the heads of all 54 of the major religious denominations out of the Jesuit headquarters and asked them to put together a task force to start getting out ahead of this issue so that we could start adjusting, might I say, elevating the kind of level of consciousness of the major religious traditions to try to cope with and integrate this larger reality. And so I was engaged in that process, and I was contacted by Dr. John Mack at Harvard, who had written a book about this, because as it turns out, the United States Air Force and the military and the Defense Department, along with the CIA, had this project underway where they were not only recovering crashed UFOs and trying to back engineer them, but they had this covert program underway trying to destroy the reputation of anybody who tried to investigate the UFO phenomenon. And anybody who tried to talk about their having seen a UFO, they would come and visit them and threaten them to keep them silent. I was offended by that. So when Dr. Mack, one of the first things that they would do in the Defense Department, if any high-level military official kept insisting upon getting briefed in on the UFO program, they would immediately order him to go get a psychiatric exam. It was part of the way they were trying to deter anybody from doing it. And so a number of these high-level military officials have been sent to Harvard Medical School to get the psychiatric exam. And it was Dr. John Mack that actually was the head of the department who administered those tests. And he became puzzled after a half a dozen of these guys saying, look, this is something very weird is going on here, because these guys test out as being very much within the normal parameters of psychiatric normalcy, that they're all having this experience of having seen the UFOs. They're extraordinarily interested and concerned about this, and they keep pressing it inside their military services, and they've been forced to come and get this psychiatric exam. So he decided he was going to write an article about this for the New England Journal of Medicine, actually, and he submitted the article, and they refused to publish it. So he said, oh, I'm going to sit down and rework this article and put in a lot more footnotes, make it very scholarly. And he'd already won the Pulitzer Prize for literature. He did the definitive psychobiography of T. Lawrence and won the Pulitzer Prize for us. So he said, I know how to do a scientific study. So he sent it back to them, and they sent it back to him, the executive assistant to the board of editor, the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, sent the package back unopened. said wanted to make sure that his executive assistant told Dr. Mack that they hadn't even opened it. They weren't even going to look at it. They weren't even going to consider publishing it. And he was so upset that he published it as a book and got dragged up in front of the faculty at Harvard to challenging his tenure for undermining the public reputation of Harvard for even looking at a thing like that. So he contacted me and asked me to, since I'd been to the college and the law school and the divinity school, to come in and represent him in front of this faculty committee. And so that was really the crossover point where I started getting introduced to all kinds of people to be witnesses, to actually present them at the Harvard University as sort of a grand rounds on this question of UFOs and extraterrestrial life. And so I got to meet Bud Hopkins, I got to meet Stanton Friedman, I got to meet, all of the major people, Colonel Wendell Stevens, I got to meet all of the major people, David Jacobs and everybody. And so I also then, when we won that and got Harvard to drop it, because I informed them that we were lining up major witnesses to present to them on this question. I confronted the committee. I said, look, whatever the nature of this committee is that you've gathered here, this faculty committee, are either one of the two following fact questions going to be at issue? Number one, whether an extraterrestrial civilization exists, and secondly, whether the UFO phenomenon, at least one or more of these sightings, was actually a vehicle from an extraterrestrial civilization. And Arthur Relman, who was chairing the faculty committee, who by the way was the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, who had refused to publish his article to begin with, when I said, are either of these two fact questions going to be at issue? And he said, well, absolutely, they're going to be at issue. And it's totally ridiculous to think that either one of those things is true. And so that was sort of the status of that Harvard University. It's sort of the seat of the liberal ethic in Western civilization, at least in their own mind, was actually willing to take the position that, it was ridiculous to think that UFOs were real and that they came from an extraterrestrial civilization. So I informed them that John Mack and I had been to see Lawrence Rockefeller, and Lawrence Rockefeller had agreed to finance a complete grand rounds at Harvard University on this issue. And so I got to spend the time preparing that grand rounds. We got to meet almost all the major players anywhere in the world to bring on as witnesses. And so when we ended up winning that, John Mack had me become general counsel for his project for extraordinary experience research. And I got to meet all kinds of experiencers, all kinds of people who were completely convinced that they had had a direct face-to-face encounter with extraterrestrial beings. They had seen ships land and people get off and talk with them. So I became engulfed in this particular issue. And because of that, I was contacted in 2001 by Dr. Stephen Greer, and he asked me to be legal counsel for the Disclosure Project. In May of 2001, we brought together 24 government officials and employees who had had direct knowledge about these programs and brought them to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and presented them under oath to the staff of Congress. But at that time, none of the congressmen would come. They didn't dare, because they thought that they would be attacked, by this covert program that the CIA and the Defense Department, some mysterious unit inside the Defense Department, had going, destroying the political careers and legal careers and professional careers of anybody who tried to challenge them. So I was legal counsel for the Disclosure Project for 20 full years, and got to, again, meet almost all the people, Travis Walton and all of the Andreessen family, the other people that are famous people who've been involved in this program. And I got to meet them all in the context of being the lawyer for this whole movement. And so that's how I became involved in this. And then Lou Elizondo, who you mentioned at the top of the meeting here, he was the head of the top secret program inside the Pentagon, actually continuing to investigate the UFO phenomenon. And he, as you know, and all your listeners probably know, he became totally frustrated over the fact that he was being shut out. And he knew that there was some group deep in the Defense Department and the intelligence community that was controlling this. And they were shutting him out from getting the information. And Congress had already appropriated like $22 million for his program to dig out this information. And he was being blocked from getting at it. So he wrote a letter to Secretary of Defense Maddox Mattis and complained about it, and his letter got impounded. They wouldn't give it to him, and so he resigned in protest. And he brought with him these three now quite famous videos, the F-18 Super Hornet videos, and brought them to the New York Times, along with Christopher Mellon, who was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence under both President Clinton and under George W. Bush. The two of them brought this information to the New York Times, and very importantly, the board of editors of the New York Times found it to be so completely convincing that they published it, and they released these videos, and that began sort of the more recent era of this entire UFO phenomenon, and it's resulted in us getting the complaint that we filed immediately after that, because the Defense Department tried to retaliate against both Lou and against Chris Mellon and challenge their security clearances. And so I was representing Lou, and we filed a complaint with the Defense Department's Inspector General, complaining about what they were doing, and also complaining about the fact that there was this illegal program going on that was completely unconstitutional. That they had this secret program going on, and they were not only not briefing Congress in on it, but they were lying. They were actively lying to Congress, committing perjury to Congress. They were lying to presidents and concealing this information. Like, who did they think they were? I mean, to deny the information to the president and to the Secretary of Defense and to the Congress, that they actually had begun to suspect that they were the government instead of the government of the United States. Now, we encountered that same kind of problem in the Iran-Contra case, as you remember, where this deep covert operation inside the Central Intelligence Agency, its operations directorate, began to believe they were the government of the United States, and they could defy Congress. They could refuse to brief in presidents about what they were doing. And our office, initiated the federal criminal racketeering charges against them, and got the special prosecutor appointed, Lawrence Walsh, and generated major congressional hearings to expose what was going on. So that's obviously one of the reasons, I think, why Lou Elizondo contacted me to ask me to become his lawyer. And so we crafted a complaint with the Inspector General that was a lot broader than just a simple whistleblower complaint. What we were saying is that this entire program was illegal and unconstitutional, and that they had to promulgate a certain number of protocols to protect people inside the military services and intelligence community that could bring forth this information to Congress and not get retaliated against. And so the broad complaint that Lou Elizondo filed started to generate a whole lot of activity inside the Defense Department and the intelligence community. And then Lou and Chris Mellon and others began to come forward to the Senate Intelligence Committee, saying, look, you guys know that you're being excluded from this information. You have a constitutional obligation to get this information in order to help formulate the policies for our government. We can't have some super secret clandestine group deep inside the Defense Department somewhere, making these decisions. The whole government of our United States needs to make this decision, and the people need to know about this. So that is what has generated the putting together of the initial statute that we got passed back in 2022 that protected the whistleblowers on this issue, and set up an office called the AARO office, the All Domain Anomalous Resolution Office. It was a place where the people could come and bring the information, still under top secret classification, but to bring it to them so that they could end up briefing Congress. The problem is that office, the AARO office, was still under the auspices of the Defense Department and the intelligence community. They're the ones that have been concealing the information for 75 years.
The wolves are guarding the hen house in this case.
So the whistleblowers didn't trust them. And so they didn't go to them. What they did is they continued coming to the Senate Intelligence Committee, where primarily Senator Rubio, who was Lou Elizondo's senator from Florida, was actually leaning in on trying to get something done about this. And so that we all worked together to craft a new statute that actually would get Senator Schumer, the majority leader of the Senate, to sponsor this, along with one of the most conservative senators, from South Dakota, the reddest of the red states. They co-joined together. You had Marco Rubio, and you had Senator Christian Gillibrand from New York. You had people over on the House side that were all supportive of this 64-page piece of legislation, basically the UFO Controlled Disclosure Act. And that's what we people put together that thing. I wasn't directly involved in the drafting, but I was talking to the people that were, and that got put together and proposed, and it was passed by the Senate Intelligence Committee by 17-0. I mean, it was an absolutely completely bipartisan support for it. It had every single one of the Republican senators, every single one of the Democratic senators voted for it. It passed the United States Senate unanimously, and it was sent over to the House to try to set up an independent board to demand that all this information be turned over to the board, and that they then review it and decide what information ought to be released to the public, and what information needed to be postponed. But they wanted to then set up, pursuant to that bill, a UFO controlled disclosure campaign that would take over like a 7-year period in which they would roll out the information to the people of the United States, to Congress, and to the world, what they had now discovered. And so that piece of legislation was put out and passed by the Senate the day after Colonel David Grush testified over in the House side to the House Oversight Committee, testifying under oath that we were in possession of an intact extraterrestrial non-human spacecraft, along with biological evidence of the species that was operating the UFOs. And he testified to that on July 26th of 2023. And the Senate passed this bill the very next day on the 27th, saying we had to go and reveal this. In the House, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Michael Turner, his name was, he stuck his thumb right in everybody's eye and said, no, we're not going to let this get passed. And it turns out he comes from the 10th Congressional District in Ohio, which is the home of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And it's also the principal field office for Radiance Technology, which is one of the aerospace industry that's trying to back engineer the technology from the UFOs to make a super weapon, a missile system that can deliver a first strike attack against Russia or China from launch within 2 minutes.
Is this the excuse me, the prompt global strike?
Yeah, prompt global strike.
Yeah.
It was the code name for the program, so they were in the process of trying to commandeer and keep secret the fact that they had this UFO in possession, and they were going to back engineer the technology just to make a super weapon.
So has that if I may interrupt, has that been officially established that Radiance actually is in possession of material, or is that still kind of murky?
Well, I mean, that they haven't admitted it publicly, but on the other hand, nobody admitted anything in public until Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon came forward, and then David Grush and others. We've now got 40 people who have come forward to the Senate Intelligence Committee and are providing detailed evidence along with documentation to prove the program. And the reality is that Radiance Technology had been involved over a period of time with Lockheed Martin, trying to get an agreement where they could get possession of the same technology that Lockheed Martin had been given. And so that these two major aerospace corporations, we know, are engaged in that process, and we know that it's called prompt global strike. That's what the program is.
Sounds so convenient. When you want to launch a global strike, you want it to be prompt as can be, right?
Yeah. Well, the problem is if it gets too prompt, then nobody can defend against it, and you totally destroy the entire geopolitical structure that we put in place for warning each other and making sure that no mistakes are made and that nobody thinks that somebody's going to attack them, so rapidly that they can't defend themselves,
So if I may jump in here, because you've very articulately sort of set the stage and set the table for where we're at and how we got here. And I have so many questions just from the first few minutes of what you had to say. I want to go back to those, but just real quick on this point, is it your position that the speed and pace that this thing is moving has something or has everything to do with developing some type of a super first strike weapon or a checkmate capability that is based off of this technology? And is that the thing that's pushing this thing forward at such speed? It feels like since 2017, this thing has just been gaining steam. And Ross Coulthart has mentioned publicly on his own podcast, I believe, that there is a constraint on time. And I wonder what can you say about that? And do you think this is this all related, or is there something else going on that we don't know about that's pushing this all forward? Can you talk about that for a moment?
Well, Clint, it's what we try to do at the New Paradigm. The New Paradigm Institute has been set up to basically mobilize the American citizens to intervene in this process, to demand that the information be, first of all, turned over to Congress, so that Congress constitutionally can exercise its responsibility to oversee the program with regard to this, and that the American people need to be informed so that we can, as in a democracy, we can participate in these decisions that are being made. There are a lot of things that we don't know yet. Like I've always refused to accept a national security clearance. I don't want or need a clearance, because if I were to ever accept a national security clearance, they would then say you can't say anything about anything that you know about this. And as you can tell, I know a good deal about this, and have been working on this for over 45 years. So I have talked to a lot of the first person people. I've talked to the whistleblowers. I've talked to all kinds of people. So I know an awful lot. And that there are some things we don't know, and that the proper authorities to figure these things out are the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee that can dig in on this. They have subpoena power. They can extract the information from them. What we've been trying to do is to get them to do that. The challenge is that they've been so frightened. The members of the Senate and the House are so frightened of being retaliated against by this covert program that the Defense Department has, that they weren't willing to do it. And so when Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon came forward and persuaded the board of editors of the New York Times to reveal the fact that there is, in fact, this program going on inside the United States government, that put pressure on Congress to have to do something. When back in May of 2001, I personally escorted, general officers in the United States Air Force to sit down with their congressperson and tell them to their face about the program that was going on. And the congressman uniformly said, I don't dare do anything about this. I don't dare do anything about this. I would have my whole political career destroyed, by this covert program if I tried to do anything about it. And as a constitutional lawyer, that was so shocking and offensive to me that the members of the United States Senate and House of Representatives have been intimidated by this secret, deep state operation that's going on, that they didn't even dare perform their own constitutional responsibility. So I've been working to try to get something done about this. There are things I don't know, some things I don't know. I do know that that Radiance Technologies, happens to have their major field office in the exact congressional district where Michael Turner is, in the 10th congressional district of Ohio. That's where their field major field office is. I know that they've been having these ongoing negotiations with Lockheed Martin to get them to turn over the UFO technology that Lockheed Martin has. And I know that I know people who've sat down and talked face to face with Rice, who was the director of Lockheed Martin, who actually acknowledged that they had the technology there. They met with General Wilson or Admiral Wilson, and
Mhm.
basically told them that they had the stuff, and they weren't going to tell Admiral Wilson about it, who was the J2. He was the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and they still wouldn't tell him. But they acknowledged that they had it.
Are you aware of the I guess it's a piece of UFO lore now, but the story of President Carter being briefed on something about this issue and then crying in the Oval Office? Do you know this
No,
story?
no. What I got was the details of him on the 19th of November of 2000 of 1976, after having been elected, of summoning CIA Director George H.W. Bush to his home in Plains, Georgia, and directly confronting him on this and saying that, look, I saw a UFO. He saw a UFO in 1969 when he was governor of Georgia, down in this little town called Leon, Georgia, along with 10 other people at a Lions Club meeting. They all saw it. It was within 300 yards of them, and it was there from 10 to 12 minutes. So it wasn't as though it was like some, blinking light in the sky somewhere. So he saw it. And so and he had stated before during the campaign in 1976 that if he were to become president, he would reveal all of the information about the UFO sightings to the American people. And so then as soon as he got elected, one of the very first things he did on the 19th of November was summon the CIA director and ask to be briefed in on it. And George Bush refused to brief him on it, saying that he had no need to know, and he wasn't going to tell him about it. And so that's when President Carter asked to have this study done by the Congressional Research Service in the Science and Technology Division. And what I know from being involved in that, I knew all about his request to get it. I found out all about his sighting that he had had. I found out the details as to who, in fact, President Carter wanted to appoint to be the new head of the CIA instead of George Bush. I knew all of that stuff from the inside at that time. I did not ever hear of him actually being briefed. I do know that after he was elected, and people brought up to him the fact that he had publicly stated that he was going to reveal the information, they asked him if he had in fact been briefed, and he said, "I'm not at liberty to discuss that." He didn't cry then. I don't know when he did, and I have no, we will find out. One of the things that our New Paradigm Institute is designed to do is to dig out the factual information about these things. So I'm in the process right now preparing a list of the 100 major facts that the citizens need to know about the UFO issue that we can verify. And we're following the Rule 11 Federal Rules of Civil Procedure standard of reliability that you have to have in order to present something in admissible form in a court, so that we're using that prism through which to evaluate the evidence that we're getting, and we're going to make it available to the people. This is in the context of mobilizing people to put the pressure on the different congressional representatives to hold public hearings. That's what they need to do. So I don't know yet what the answer to that question is about him crying. They said the same thing about the Pope. They said the same thing about, the third secret of Fatima, that he finally got to look at it and cried when he saw it, and then said, no, we don't want to. A lot of that could be mythology. We don't know yet. But we do know that we're in a position to find out, that when you have a New Paradigm Institute that we have now, we're based in Washington, D.C. We're right there on Capitol Hill. We're the only civilian group basically within the federal enclave. We've got offices right there immediately next door to the Senate Intelligence Committee. So we're meeting with them regularly. And as the citizens group, applying pressure for public hearings, and we'll find out about this. Now, President Carter is still alive, but he's declined to answer questions about this to date. So we'll see what the answer. But there are 1,000 little factoid questions like this that people want to know about, and that what we're trying to do is get the most important 100 facts established first, and then we'll dig down into some more of the more detailed information about this.
I'd like to stay with this for a moment because that's actually one of my questions I have further down the list about how do we know what we know, and how do we know that it's accurate? And I think that it seems like right now the pulse that I'm getting from sort of the community is that the information, the zone is being flooded, and we don't know what's real, we don't know what's misinformation, we don't know what's disinformation. This whole thing has been polluted for so many decades, and people don't know which way is up, and they seem to be like grabbing for some kind of a handhold so that we can orient ourselves and figure out which direction is forward. And as you just mentioned, it sounds like the New Paradigm Institute is going to serve the function of being able to vet this information and put it forward so that people are armed with actual facts that they can say, no, we know this is true, this has been looked at. Is that's correct?
That's absolutely correct. So the New Paradigm Institute, they can just go for free to the newparadigminstitute.org, just newparadigminstitute.org. Number one, they can take action. They can just push a button, and they put in their zip code, and they'll know who their congressperson is and who their senators are if they don't. And a message will be sent to their senators and congresspeople demanding public hearings on this, and they'll then be able to get information that we'll be providing regular information. We're setting up a whole major digital information system that can respond to questions, can give people answers. We have we're bringing on the staff now to that our institute, the Romero Institute, which has done a lot of the major cases in the past, has set up this entirely new integrated auxiliary project of the New Paradigm Institute with separate offices in Washington, D.C. To be operational. And we are going to be providing the information to the people. We had hoped to be able to get the full 64-page statute passed that the Senate Intelligence Committee had written. And so that we were then going to be helping to get out into the American public the information that was being released by that board. Now the board has been withdrawn, has been taken out of the bill that has been passed. So we're trying to get it put back in. But what we're trying to do is we still have possession of lots and lots of information that the whistleblowers have provided, et cetera. And we can start getting this out to people in a comprehensive and comprehensible format. And that's what the New Paradigm Institute is going to be doing.
Would you, as part of that, be educating people on how you know this information is accurate and what the methods were to vet that information?
As a lawyer, as a lawyer, I realize that you have to do that. You know, in providing your information to the to a jury, for example, you know, the expert will come on the stand and they'll tell what they understand the facts to be, and then the people will examine them and say, okay, well, how did you figure this out? You know, what was the method you got your facts from? How credible are they, et cetera? Those are all, we're totally transparent with what we're doing. As of right now, one of the reasons we want as many of the 40 whistleblowers as possible to come forward in public hearings in Congress is so that we can then cite them to let people know, here's how we know that this particular piece of information is true. Here's the person who was the source of it. Here are the documents that they've provided to the Senate Intelligence Committee to show that it's true. But as of right now, we're still in that position that they're under national security clearance restrictions. And so that we're trying to choreograph a process by means of which this can be exposed in a way that the sources can be provided to people so they can make their own judgments about how credible this information is.
If there is a discernible center to this whole controversy, you are one of the people closest to it, and you are certainly in a position to know. So I have to ask, Stephen Greer's National Press Club event back in 2001 was actually a kind of a pivotal moment for me personally, because I remember watching that and learning about Stephen Greer, and that was sort of the beginning of my formal education into what was actually going on. And then
I was there for that. I met those witnesses. I was part of the legal team backstage of vetting information. That's what I do for the Disclosure Project.
It seems like the information that came out of that was every bit as astonishing as the information that we're learning today. And yet, back then, there wasn't a lot of forward motion after that information came out. As you mentioned, there was pushback from the deep state, kind of preventing that. How does this moment differ from that moment? And do you see us going forward with more support from members of Congress? I mean, it certainly seemed like Marco Rubio was shell shocked when he came out of some of those briefings and he went on to do press conferences. He was just like, I just saw something that blew my mind. But how do we know that they won't get the same pushback that that happened before, and this just gets run off the road, so to speak?
Well, it's an excellent question, Clint. And what the first thing we need to do is to move the information out of its deep secret caverns where it's being concealed and get it into the hands of Congress. Okay, that's the very first step. Now, the fact is it'll go into the hands of the Intelligence Committee first, because they have all the security clearances. So that the information will not be out from under the security clearances just because we've gotten it given to Congress. But the fact of the matter is that we can get Congress to then pass laws to decide they're going to release this. Now, that relationship, that in fact, that is a major constitutional question, is whether the president of the United States has the right to prohibit information from being revealed, even if Congress wants it revealed. In fact, it's kind of an inside baseball question, but when President Biden actually signed into law the UFO Disclosure Act in its 24-page form, he actually put a signing statement in saying that there's a provision in there that prohibits the utilization of any Defense Department money on anything having to do with UFOs unless the Congress is briefed in on it. And he put in a signing statement saying he is not necessarily going to be bound by that he doesn't necessarily view the executive branch as being bound by Congress ordering them to give the information to Congress, because he said that I'm going to make sure that however any information is conveyed and whatever information is conveyed is done in such a way as to protect the national security of the United States. So he's reserving to himself, and that is to the executive branch that was created under Article 2 of the Constitution, some sort of degree of discretion as to whether he's going to allow Congress to have it. And that's a major issue that needs to get focused on here, because there's a United States Supreme Court case that was decided back in around 1954. It's called Youngstown Sheet and Tube versus Sawyer, for anybody who cares. But it was during the Korean War, and the United States steel employees, union people, went on strike against the steel companies. And President Truman asserted that it was necessary for our national defense to have the steel mills operating to provide military equipment in the Korean War. And so he ordered them to go back to work, and they refused. And so he actually designated the United States military to go into the steel plants and run them. And so a lawsuit was filed saying, you don't have the right to do this. And so Justice Jackson put forth an absolutely pivotal concurring opinion in that case, in which he laid out saying, look, when the president decides he wants to do something and Congress has not spoken on it at all, he has sort of the maximum degree of discretion under his Article 2 authority to make decisions in the area of foreign policy and national security. When Congress has acted, he then has limitations placed upon the discretion. So Congress has the authority, per a Supreme Court decision, to limit the discretion that a president has. And then they said, thirdly, if the Congress has acted in a way to specifically order the president to do something or to prohibit him from doing something, then the president's discretion is at its absolute ebb, as they put it. And so that there's still that constitutional question that has to get resolved here as to whether or not the CIA and the secret DARPA people and the operations director of the CIA and the Joint Special Operations Command of the Pentagon, whether they have the authority acting on behalf of the president to withhold information from Congress and still demand that Congress fund it at the same time. That's the black budget question, and it hasn't been confronted yet. And so one of the things that needs to be discussed in some public hearings is, exactly how far Congress is going to go in ordering the president to turn over this information to Congress, okay, or to get his CIA and his Defense Department people to turn it over. And this is an issue that, frankly, ought to be discussed in the election. That anybody who wants to be a candidate for president, now that this information is out in the public view, needs to speak to this question. Well, how much transparency are you going to provide as president of the United States about the UFO phenomenon? So our institute is going to be dealing with all of those things. That's why I, as the co-founder of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review, have some insight into these constitutional questions, but they're a little subtle for trying to deal with huge, massive movements to get to do something other than give us the information. So that we're asking people to come to newparadigminstitute.org and get briefed in on this. And in fact, we're actually going to be holding courses for which people can get full college credit. I mean, you can get a bachelor's degree for credit for taking these courses if you'd like to. You can get a master's degree. You can even get a PhD in extraterrestrial studies through the New Paradigm Institute. We've set it up so that we have full accreditation through a major university to be able to give people credit for this, so that people who want to become really more and more expert at this can get as much information as you can possibly imagine if they will come to newparadigminstitute.org and ask us the questions. We'll tell you what we know already. We'll set up the courses for people to come and get. It'll be all virtual, so people don't have to travel to Washington, D.C. to our offices to take the courses. They can take the courses virtually. And so what we're doing is we're setting up, this is the ET moment. We've come to the ET moment. We've gotten Congress to actually pass into law now a command ordering the Defense Department and the intelligence agencies to turn over this information to Congress. We're getting a little pushback on that still, them trying to reserve the right to have some discretion as to whether they'll give it to them or not. So what we have to do is maintain the momentum on this. We have to keep coming forward as the citizens. So we're talking about mobilizing people as they start coming back from the holidays here after having passed this law on December 22nd. To come back into session and take it up again. And Senator Schumer, the majority leader of the Senate, and Mike Rounds and Rubio and Gillibrand and others have taken the position that they're going to try to get enforcement mechanisms put back into this law to make these people turn this information over to Congress. But we need the support of the American people to get wind under their wings in order to have them dare to confront the executive branch on this. So that's one of the main things that our New Paradigm Institute is going to be doing. And so we want people to get in touch with us. As I say, it's all free. The courses they're going to try to figure out. We're going to hire professional historians and astronomers and biophysicists and everybody to help teach these courses. So some of those will cost some money, but it's not going to be coming to us. It's going to be going to the instructors.
It sounds like to a certain extent this is going to be like herding cats to get Congress all on the same page. And I have to ask if it just took Mike Rogers, Mike Turner, to sort of derail the Schumer amendment. Do we need like full unanimous support to press on or push forward, or is there a way to do this if there is still resistance from that side, if they just don't go away and they keep flexing that muscle?
Well, it's the latter. That we now are. We're capable, because this is such a bipartisan issue. Strangely enough, we can go right into the 10th congressional district in Ohio and mobilize those citizens. We've set up the digital network to be able to reach into those communities and mobilize them and say, look, just because you're a red district it doesn't mean that you shouldn't want to know the information about the UFO issue. And look at who all the Republican senators and congresspeople are who want to do that. You happen to have a particular congressman who's your elected representative who's basically on the payroll, of Radiance Technology, but you don't have to be bound by that. You can demand that he relent and allow you, or you'll replace him. You'll vote for somebody else. So that what we're trying to do is we're trying to exercise all of the constitutional and democratic muscles that we have as citizens. And up to this point in time, I mean, people have always just sort of sat back, watching football games and watching movies on, HBO and letting somebody else do the job for them, and that's why it's been concealed from us. So we need to come forward now and exercise our authority as citizens to demand this information.
I think where a lot of people have trouble is that, for one, this is a lot and it's coming on very fast. And for the average person who's just trying to get through the week, make ends meet, take care of, their grocery bill and work a job and raise kids, this is a lot. Can you describe for us what you see as, if when the disclosure moment happens, there's going to be an aha moment, I think, right? Where there's a before this moment and then there's an after. And every day after that, the world is just going to be a different place. And I don't know what
There's going to be a video of an actual interview of an actual extraterrestrial being.
You know this.
Yes. So I mean, I know that exists. And that's part of the crown jewels that they're not going to want to reveal.
But is that's on the table to come out?
Well, what I'm saying is that I talked to the person who was there, and that they've got this on film. And so that if you're really going to get down, when you say we get to the nut of the whole thing, that's the kind of thing that once it's shown to the American public, there's, Katie bar the door. There's nothing that can be denied anymore. And up until now, even though you have David Grush, who's, the person from the National Reconnaissance Office assigned to the UFO task force inside the Office of Naval Intelligence, comes forward under oath and testifies to a House committee, all on video, and it only sinks into with about 2 to 3 or 4% of the people in the country because they're off doing something else. So the question is, how specific does it have to get? How graphic does the information have to be? You always hear about, oh, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Or why don't they land in Central Park? Like Keanu Reeves did. Why don't they do that? But the bottom line is that what we're trying to do is provide a deeper and deeper revelation of the information, so that more and more people can have the aha moment. They'll say, okay, good, now I know it's true.
Going back to what you just said, you made a really great point about sort of the aha moment and why don't they land in Central Park? And I think that is a question that a lot of people are struggling with, which is, okay, we understand the deep state. We understand their motivations. Those who have looked into this and spent the time researching it are familiar with the way that the deep state operates and their sort of motivations. But the question still remains, the non-human intelligence that we're talking about are not bound by any deal they may have made with the deep state. They could do whatever they want. Why are they choosing, we've heard so many stories about treaties and conversations that have happened between beings and apparently people at Lockheed or somewhere in the military industrial complex. If this is all true, why are they choosing to talk to such a small group of people who were not chosen by anyone else to speak for them? In other words, who actually should be speaking for Earth, and why are these non-human intelligences not speaking to them, like at the UN, for example?
Well, let's take it one step at a time. Is that the question of why don't the UFO people themselves just come forward and announce themselves and land in Central Park and tell people that they're here? That the best example of this is that Lou Elizondo and I were sitting with some of the staff people that were in the UFO investigative group inside the Defense Department. And they asked the same question. They were kind of frustrated by how much they were trying to do to get this exposed? And I said this, there's a famous story about a little boy who loved butterflies. And he would collect different butterflies, and he had this entire kind of aviary, this big netting thing in his backyard where all the butterflies could fly around. And he was trying to get a perfect example of a monarch butterfly. And he finally found a cocoon of a monarch butterfly, and he brought it home and he put it in a little box with cotton in it, put lights on it to keep it nice and warm, and observed this thing over time. And it came to a point where the butterfly had developed inside and was trying to break out of the cocoon. And it was breaking out and struggling, and he was watching this whole thing go on. Finally, the butterfly got to the point where there was just one silken thread left, and it was struggling like mad, beating its wings against it, trying to get out, trying to get out. And the little boy watched this and started feeling so sad about this. He finally went and got a little pair of scissors, and he clipped the last little silken thread, and the butterfly came free. And it was an absolutely perfect specimen of a monarch butterfly, except that it could never fly. Because as it turns out, he had to struggle against that last silken thread to develop the muscle structure that would have enabled the butterfly to fly. And it's that perspective, I think, that the UFO people have, is that, while we're bombing each other, in the Middle East, and we're, got people fighting each other in water up to their knees in trenches in Ukraine, and in taking their technology and trying to develop a nuclear missile that'll land in the Soviet Union in 2 minutes, that what they're saying is, look, that you have to do this partly yourself. You have to be able to develop the kind of consciousness where you share, affection with each other and view yourself at least as a unified species, before we can actually dare to bring you on out into the universe. You are a dangerous specimen here that we're worried about. So I can perfectly understand, what their concern is. And I think that story of the little boy and the butterfly is the most dramatic example. And I gave that story to Lou and to the people, and they actually, it kind of dawned on them. Said, yeah, wait, I see what you're saying. So we know what the national security state does. We know the way the Congress people are. We know that there have been threats made to these members of Congress that they'll destroy their political career if they try to push this issue. And so that what we're trying to do as the New Paradigm Institute, I come all the way from Jesuit national headquarters originally. I come up out of Harvard University and Harvard Law School, and the number one law firm in the country and the number one criminal defense. I've come through all this process. So what we're trying to do is bring all of that kind of learning and that kind of expertise about how our system works to bring it together in the New Paradigm Institute, so that we can provide the information to the people in a way that people can understand it, they can appreciate it, we can answer their questions, we can give people courses so that they can move according to their own abilities, to absorb the information and understand what it is that's going on. We're trying to develop an entire citizen diplomacy program, who can actually reach out to some of these beings. I mean, there are thousands of people who have had direct encounters with these beings, but the people aren't in a situation where they're prepared to do something about it. So what we're trying to do is John Mack and I were doing that just before he was killed. We were trying to develop a citizen diplomacy corps, and we had people getting training in holotropic breathing. This is a mechanism for doing deep breathing to stay calm when you encounter a being like this, because your entire cellular structure reacts in this way of being completely terrified, no matter how brave you think you are. When you find a UFO person standing in your living room, as Barbara Lamb did, for example, one time, this wonderful lady who's done hundreds of sessions with people who have been traumatized by having some of these contact experiences, and there was this 6 foot tall reptile guy standing in her living room, and she was able to remain calm and centered and to be able to experience the kind of affection that the being communicated, and that it wasn't threatening and wasn't trying to hurt her or anything. And so we're trying to get people into that same kind of state of consciousness so that people can absorb this reality. And we don't have to wait for the national security state to tell us. We can, in fact, reach out. And one of the things we're going to be doing at the New Paradigm Institute in the training courses that we have is have people have this holotropic breathing, have this experience and know more and more about it, so they know the right questions to ask when they encounter one of these beings. So it sounds like science fiction. I mean, this all starts to sound like science fiction, but it's not, because we've now reached the moment where you have open hearings of the United States Congress with people under oath testifying about the possession of these craft, and the biological evidence of an extraterrestrial civilization. It's all here now. And so what we have to do is choreograph this in a way that makes it digestible. And the New Paradigm Institute, by dint of its name, is involved in trying to design a new paradigm worldview, a whole new paradigm worldview that absorbs the reality of the existence of this extraterrestrial civilization. To realize that we are not only not at the geographic center of the entire universe that we one time thought we were, we got through that with Copernicus and Galileo, but now we now have to come to the realization that we're not at the pinnacle of the pyramid of all sentient life in the universe. And so we have to try to develop a sense of our own value in our proper place in the universe, not in charge of the whole universe. The whole physical universe doesn't exist just as a stage to play out the drama of our one species, kind of evolving from kind of a primordial single cell into star travelers. There's other things going on in the universe. And so we have to, at the New Paradigm Institute, try to assist our human family in coming to understand all this and absorb that reality and figure out how to adjust our institutions. We have to adjust our religious institutions, our philosophy, our geopolitics, all of these things. And nobody's doing that yet. They're all still caught on the question of whether this exists or not. We know that it exists, and I've talked to the people who know that this exists. And so we're moving to the next stage of preparing for this process. That's what's happening at the New Paradigm Institute.
Are you aware of anyone who I think this whole concept is fascinating, and that you're starting from a position of this is a foregone conclusion, this is coming, and when it happens, we have to be prepared. I am curious. It seems that the overwhelming consensus is that these beings communicate telepathically, and that consciousness plays a very central role in the next level up from where we're at. Are there experts that you're aware of who understand and know and can train others on how to conduct themselves and how to communicate and how to use this sort of latent capacity that it seems like most people have some of? Is there like a room of Shaolin monks somewhere that can teach others how to do this? Like, how they operate in a mental realm where most people don't have any experience. So how does one prepare for that? Or can you speak to that?
Yes. Well, the people inside our government programs that are the closest to this were, of course, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ and the people. They actually set up a program at Stanford, at the Stanford Research Institute, attempting to develop these type of psychic capacities to be able to communicate telepathically and to be able to engage in remote viewing and be able to view into the future. And there are human capacities that are known about in theological circles. For example, virtually every one of the major religions of the world, not just the Catholic and Christian traditions and Jewish traditions with the Kabbalah and all that, but the Hindus and the Buddhists, they all realize that at the highest levels of their religious knowledge that our human family has capacities that we're completely ignorant of. That there are beings, in fact, who can transmute matter from one element into another. That there are people who can levitate. There are people who can predict future. There's all kinds of these qualities that the UFO beings have displayed in their encounters with human beings that just baffle people, that seem like magic, that they can pass through walls, that they can, lift the person up out of their home and up through the roof and into their spacecraft. There are all these stories that go on. And the reality is that our human family is knowledgeable about capabilities that our human family has, our species has, that have not been developed. And what's happening is, much like the government has kept secret from the people their knowledge about this stuff, the churches in synagogues have kept only an extraordinarily rarefied portion of their community be informed about these capacities that our human family has, so that we have the means at our disposal for sharing this information more broadly through our religious institutions, that we can do that. I think that's one of the major areas that we have to explore here. That's why we're reaching out to try to bring together, again, at the New Paradigm Institute, to bring together the leaders of the world religions to have a summit conference together, to come to some sort of consensus. Look, that what we've got to do is loosen up on some of this information that we know and get it to our people, to actually help our people. You know, the Catholic Church is as guilty as this as most institutions. What they've said is, oh, look, you guys, the regular people, aren't capable of handling all of these special capabilities. You know, you can't cast out pearl before the swine, as they say. And so that, and even Jesus, according to their own scriptures, you know, would have these private meetings with his disciples and tell them things that he wouldn't share with everybody else. You know, the Transfiguration, where he brought the two disciples out and transformed himself into this huge radiant being. You know, there's all these stories that exist inside our human culture that let us know that we have these capabilities. So that's one whole dynamic that the religious institutions can play a part in elevating the consciousness of our entire human family, to start to be able to exercise capabilities that we didn't have before, that are much more like what we're experiencing with the UFO beings. One of which, the major one of which, is telepathic communications, of course. But people have known that forever. I mean, the institute at Princeton, you know, there was an entire program on this. Duke University had a whole program on this, you know, where they were demonstrating that people have these capabilities. There's the Monroe Institute, you know, that there are facilities where we can do this. So the New Paradigm Institute is going to be trying to help people know about this, and to meet with the religious communities and get them to open up this information, and specifically focus on the Vatican, because Francis is, you know, the first Jesuit ever made Pope. You know, and the reality is, the Jesuit order back in 1547 was actually created to try to reform the Catholic Church, to try to get them to stop being so constricted, you know, and so that's one of the things that we're doing at the New Paradigm Institute.
It's fascinating the way that you explain that, because it does seem that our more formalized religious institutions are sort of stiff about this. And then it's been my experience, and I'm no expert on this, so I'll say that at the outset. But when I look at the way indigenous cultures or indigenous people talk about or think about this conversation, they're very matter of fact about it. Like, this is just part of reality. Like, you guys, in fact, there was a clip, and I don't know, you may or may not have seen this, but there was a clip that was circulating a few weeks ago, and it was a few indigenous tribes people from, I believe it was Brazil, and they were actually doing an interview on a podcast, and someone showed them a picture of a gray alien, and they had never heard the term alien, but they go, "Oh, we know what that is. That's one of the ant people." Like, you don't.
That's right. There's ant people. There's star people. Yeah.
Right. And so I always find that really fascinating, because they seem like it's just part of their day, and we are like, we've constructed this artificial sort of separation between us and everything else in our reality, and we've put it up on such a pedestal and made it so impossible to understand that we actually made this harder than it needs to be.
The indigenous people have a great deal of insight into this particular issue. You know, the Kogi people, for example, have met with astronomers and explained to them what the actual geographic structure of the universe is. So because they have exercised this faculty of discernment that our human family has. I'll say one thing, that when in spring of 1968, you know, that famous year of 1968, you know, that I had just come up from Harvard College to go to Harvard Law School, and they announced that Crane Brinton who was the head of the Department of Intellectual History at Harvard University, was getting set to retire. And he'd been asked in his very last lecture that he was going to be delivering down at the college to talk about what the most important single intellectual insight was that our human family had come to. And so I went down to the college and was there present when people had come from all around the world to listen to this last lecture. And he got up in front of us all and he said, I've been asked here in my final lecture to address what I thought was the most important intellectual insight that our human family had come to, that I've studied over 50 years of intellectual history. And he said, and the answer is easy. He said, the greatest minds of our human family have all come to the realization that our human family is on the very brink of this next step in biological evolution. And that the next step is going to be the full flowering of a new faculty that is much like seeing or hearing, that has a direct physical capability of experiencing a particular electromagnetic wavelength frequency like light or sound. But this new faculty is going to be able to discern the frequency that bonds together every ultimately irreducible integer of matter in the entire physical universe into one unified harmonic whole. And by dint of this experience of this, like seeing or hearing, that our individual person is going to be able to discern what type of human conduct, both individual or collective, is either harmonious with or disharmonious to the natural order of the universe. And he said, and I think that we're right on the brink now of that starting to flower in our human family. And that's why I think so many of you young men refuse to go fight in this war in Vietnam, he said.
Do you think that is there a connection in your view? I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Nolan's recent statements,
Sure
the caudate putamen.
I know very, very well. Yes.
Is that what we're talking about here? That actual structure of the brain and being able to like run a brain scan on somebody and say, you've got it, you don't, or this is switched on in this person.
Yeah. There are biophysical capacities that our human family has that are latent, but that they're evolving teleologically according to an unfolding. And Teilhard de Chardin talks about this. Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit priest and a paleontologist who was involved in discovering Peking man, actually, and he wrote about this. And he talks about the fact that he's implying that Jesus and the other prophets in the axial age that came forward, Muhammad and Buddha and Lao Tzu and these others, they were mutations that were actually flashing into manifestation, at the cutting edge of the beginning of this kind of unfolding of this faculty in us, displaying these capabilities, of being able to transmute water into wine, to be able to levitate and walk on the water. These are capabilities that our human family has, and that if we can accelerate that process, we can then begin to become more comfortable with an extraterrestrial species that is manifesting some of these qualities that they have existed for 4 to 5 billion years longer than we have. The universe is 13.5 billion years old. Our planet is only 4.5 billion years old. And so that they've had another 9 billion years. Some of these in other galaxies and other planets. There are 500 billion star systems just in our galaxy. And there's 500 billion galaxies. And so for us to keep on operating from a mindset where we're the only sentient, intelligent, highly technologically developed species in the universe is a barrier that we have to get over. We have to get over this, and so that we have to evolve a new paradigm worldview of who we are and how we fit in and what the capabilities of our human family really are, so that we don't, when we discover these other beings, think that we're so insignificant or we're so primitive that we don't have any real value in the universe anymore. It's the same kind of experience that some of the people experienced, the little islanders in the South Pacific Island in the 1950s, when they suddenly discovered that there was this entire world that existed outside of them, and within months, their whole civilization collapsed. That's part of the argument that some of the national security state people keep on proffering, say, oh, we can't just tell everybody because everybody will freak out, and the stock market will collapse, and so that none of that is true. If we have a controlled disclosure campaign plan in operation, that's what the bill was designed to do. That's the Senate Intelligence Bill, 64 pages laying out how we can choreograph this process. And that's what we need to get back to. We need to get back to putting in some of those other 40 pages that have been taken out by the House because of these couple guys that were basically on the payroll, of the aerospace industry that wants to keep this secret so they can make a weapon out of it.
I actually have a copy of it on my desk, and I refer to it all the time, and it's such a fascinating piece of work. And when I read it the first time, I remember like my jaw just hit the floor, and I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was just so astonishing that
That's
someone
a
actually.
real event. That's a real event in American history.
And
It's a 4-page bill. If you look at that in a unanimous vote of the Intelligence Committee to pass that into law, I mean, that's a real watershed. And so we need to get back to that spot, even though we've been pushed back temporarily, by these couple guys in the House that, are from those districts where the military dominates everything in the aerospace industry. The fact is we need to turn our attention back to that right away. So that as soon as they come back from the holidays here, we have to get back on them. We want people to get in touch with the New Paradigm Institute, newparadigminstitute.org, push the button, tell them you want to have these hearings. We're there. Our office is right there. We're going to go across and meet with them in the Dirksen building down at have lunch with the staff and say, look, let's get back to it. Let's get back to it. Let's remobilize. Let's get this done. Let's get it inserted as a campaign question. People all around running, 435 people are running for the House of Representatives again. Another third of all the senators, 33 of the senators are running again. Are you going to support more disclosure of the UFO phenomenon? Are you or are you not? Because if you're not, we still got time to get somebody else to run against you.
I know we're tight on time, and I have two more key questions I would love to throw at you. Do you have a moment for two more
Sure
questions?
I do.
Okay.
Sure I do.
On that note, let me just consult the way this was a viewer question, and I thought it was so good I have to throw it in here right now because this is the exact spot where it makes sense. I'm just going to read it word for word, and then we can go from there. What kinds of legal compromises would be desired by the groups who are opposed to disclosure that might facilitate their acquiescence to disclosure, or at least soften their total opposition? Are you aware of a deal that they would be willing to make if we would just give them X? I thought total immunity would be enough, but is there something that they're looking for that they're just not getting, and that otherwise they would come forward?
It's been a little hard to get them to fully articulate what the alternative is, because they came at it kind of piecemeal. First thing they were opposed to is the eminent domain provision that was designed to authorize the board that was going to be put together to exercise eminent domain to take back into the custody of the American government all of the UFO craft that have been put into the hands of the different aerospace technology corporations that are trying to back engineer the technology. That was the first thing that they were opposed to. Then they were opposed to, of course, the subpoena power, to actually subpoena them and take a deposition to find out what information they've got. They didn't want to do that. And then as soon as we said, we want to keep those things in, they said, well, okay, we're going to pull the entire bill. And what we did is we continue these discussions with them to get the 24 pages passed, which commands them to turn it over to the Intelligence Committee and lifts some of the time constraints. It says, you have to release this information within a reasonable time. That you have to gather it all together and have it ready within 300 days. And then, as soon as practicable, you need to make it available. Those are the kind of squirrely legal language that you don't want to see. You want to say, you got to give it to us, within 10 days of having assembled it. So we need to get those things put back in. They've never come forward and wanted to participate as active participants in disclosure. they've always been taking a defensive position. It's sort of like asking the defense in a football team, what do we have to do to have you give us the ball? you know,
Mhm.
the offensive team would say, no, that's not our job. We aren't here to give you the ball, and so that what we have to do is go past these guys. There are people who chair those two committees, the Intelligence Committee in the House and the Armed Services Committee, and the fellow Michael Johnson, who's the new Speaker of the House, and Mitch McConnell. Those are the five guys. There's four of them, and then there's one fellow, Wicker, his name is, from Alabama. These are the five people that we've identified that are speaking on behalf of the aerospace industry to try to keep this from happening. We have to run over those guys. We have to get everybody in their committee to say, we're willing as a group to defy you as the chairperson. You're not going to scare us by threatening to throw us off the committee, or not give funding to one of our programs. They're going to have to stand up and exercise their constitutional responsibility. But they're only going to do that if they think they have adequate support from the American people to have them do that. That's the job of the New Paradigm Institute, is to muscle up the people to demand that. I've had a dozen times I've been sitting in meetings when I was in Washington, D.C. for 20 years, and the congressperson will say to me, oh, I perfectly agree with you that we ought to do that. You get the people to force me to do it. Get the people to force me to do it so I can explain to those other guys that I had to do it, because they'll understand I had to do it in order to maintain my office. And so you kept saying to yourself, who are those other guys? Who are these other guys that you keep talking about? And the reality is they're part of this deep state. That there's this new, from the National Security Act of 1947, that they started to create this national security state bunker mentality, where we had to be able to establish full spectrum dominance over the whole planet in order to feel secure. And then when you ask them, well, what's the purpose of that full spectrum dominance? They don't stop at saying, oh, we have to defend ourselves about being attacked over the ice caps by Russia. What they say is we have to be able to maintain our continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials on the planet that are needed by our industries, because they believe that what's good for General Motors is good for the country. And we've got to get past that. We've got to get past this idea that we have to be the predominant military and economic power on the whole planet. And the revelation of the existence of this extraterrestrial civilization is one of the things that can help raise the consciousness of our American people, so that we don't get sucked into that anymore. That we can say, look, we're one species on this planet of millions of others here in the galaxy. And we need to accommodate ourselves to that. We have to stop threatening to blow ourselves up, with nuclear weapons, in order to give you the continued privileged access to the strategic raw materials that make you multi-billionaires. That we've got to get past that, and we've got to remove these people from being in control of our democratic institutions. We've got to get rid of them and replace them with people that have a higher level of consciousness.
I think that the sense of urgency, at least from folks in my generation, seems to be if the biosphere doesn't collapse by 2050 or shortly after, then we're definitely on the path for a global thermonuclear holocaust or some other calamity that is just going to be brought on by the system running our civilization right off the tracks, right off the cliff. And so I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and I totally agree. Couldn't agree more. I have one follow-up question to that, and then I want to change gears and ask you about something separate from this. Is there room for, or do you see a possibility where another actor with gravitas, the Vatican, for instance, or another national government, like let's just say China, makes a move that blows all this wide open and we just skip past this whole deal with our military industrial complex? Could the Vatican open their archives, the Pope makes a statement, or China demonstrates a functional anti-gravity machine? Could something like that happen? Is there room for that? Or if not that, possibly a legal battle that plays out where Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos files a lawsuit against Lockheed Martin for an unfair competitive advantage because they were given anti-gravity technology. Is there some other way that this could play out that you see?
That is one of the additional tasks of the New Paradigm Institute, is to try to figure out what all of the different tactical steps are that could be taken if, in fact, they refuse to cooperate. And that's what we're trying to say to them. Look, this is for your own good. You don't understand it. If you just keep blocking us on this kind of thing, we're gonna get the Senate Intelligence Committee to hold more hearings and bring forth more David Gershes, more of these people that are going to start revealing more and more and more stuff, that you can consider to be catastrophic. That we're offering you this kind of a controlled disclosure process. But if you're too ignorant and too stubborn to take it, we have to explore other ways that are going to be done here. That's the lesson of the Ministry of the Future, the book, The Ministry of the Future, dealing with global climate change. If you are not going to provide the care for our planet that is necessary, dramatic more steps are going to have to be taken. And we want to explore what all of those steps are, because we do not want to have the same outcome as was in the Ministry of the Future, where they had to blow up the private airplanes of all of the major oil corporation executives, to get them to stop global climate change. We don't want to go there. That we're peaceful, we're straightforward, we're transparent. We believe in the democratic processes. We trust the people, and so that we're going to do everything in our power to bring about a peaceful resolution of this problem. But we need to do it right away, because we know one of the things that a significant plurality of the people who have direct encounters with these extraterrestrial people, that they're being told two things. One is you've got to get rid of your thermonuclear weapons, because you're threatening to destroy the entire planet and ruin its life-generating capacity. The second thing is you have to stop polluting your whole atmosphere with all of these chemicals that you use for your power and your energy. You're going to ruin the life-generating capacity of your planet. That's one of the things that makes our planet so important, why so many people are coming here. Because our planet is one of the rare planets, not the only one, but one of the rare planets that is capable of gestating life. And we're threatening that entire capacity of our planet with these two technologies, is the thermonuclear weapons and the global climate change based upon the petroleum. So they've been telling us clear, and they've been telling us this for the last 50 years. It's not
I think it was I'm sorry to cut you off, but to your point, I remember seeing years ago that, and I could be wrong about this, but I think it was the Rand Corporation put out a white paper or a study that they compared a war economy or a perpetual military economy to a space exploration economy, and found that they would both kind of be equally effective in stimulating the economy if we just went forward with a Star Trek model. But they chose this was just more profitable for the people who were already in power, so they stuck with what we had.
So I guess what they would say, if you wanted to make a deal with these people, if you would say to them, look, if you'll let go of trying to use this technology for war making machinery, etc., we'll give you a monopoly control over the profits of the technology for the whole planet. I don't agree with that deal.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the kind of deal that they would demand, because they just keep saying the same thing over and over again. They're caught in this trope where the dynamic by means of which they evaluate everything is how much money they can make. Most of them have got so much money they don't know what to do with it anyhow.
And it seems like on the other side of this thing, we kind of break capitalism. Really, as we understand it, it doesn't function in a world where you have unlimited energy and unlimited. It just doesn't. And that's probably what they're really terrified of. Would you say?
Well, in fact, I've been sitting across the table from some of these people during these negotiations, and then what they're saying is you have to guarantee that you're going to preserve all the elements of power that we presently have.
Wow.
You can't threaten the economic system, you can't threaten the banking system, you can't threaten the control that we have, because we believe that we're the agents of stability in the world. They really think that it's going to be complete chaos unless they're in control, because they distrust everybody that's not in their club. I've sat across the table with them. I sat across the table from the lawyer that represents all the major oil corporations in the state of California. And perfectly well what they're driving at is,
Mhm.
look, if you will guarantee that we will have monopoly control over whatever the new alternative source of energy is, we'll agree tomorrow to stop pumping oil. But you've got to give us control. You got to let us control the new alternative energy source, because they're just fixated on that. And this ultimately, I will say, perhaps in closing, is that this is a spiritual problem. That these people don't experience the unitive phenomenon that causes them to look up into the stars at night and say, this is absolutely miraculous. Look at this extraordinary universe that we're in, and it's gestated us, and this is so fantastic. But they stand out in the yard and they look up, and all they are is see space, and they're terrified. They feel completely alienated and separate from the entire organic universe, and so that they're not experiencing this phenomenon. That's a really fundamental problem with these people. And so that it's a spiritual mission that we have to be on, to not only elevate the consciousness of all of our people, but to try to elevate the consciousness of them as well. But we can't wait for that. We can't wait to have them, be converted to this. And I don't believe in kind of superimposing upon them some sort of experience that's imposed upon them to elevate their consciousness,
Mhm.
to ray gun them with some kind of a vibrational frequency machine that elevates their vibrational frequency. That violates their own sovereignty and their own integrity. So we'll continue to try to talk with them, but we have to trust the people. We have to trust the people. And we can try to get the Catholic Church to share its mystical secrets in a more effective way. We can get in touch with all the Hindus and the Buddhists and have them try to share their views that they've ossified a bit and think that it might not work to make it available for everybody. But what we've discovered over the last 50 years is they're all starting to make these secret books available now. All the Hindu teachings and all the Buddhist teachings, all these sacred scripts, are coming out now. And so the New Paradigm Institute has to try to accelerate that, and to have courses where people can take time and sit down and say, look, if you want a bachelor's degree, you can get a bachelor's degree in extraterrestrial studies. It'll cover all of stuff: physics, chemistry, biology. They're all in there. And so that you can get your degree in this. So that we've got to reach out to the generations that are following us to have these young people educated so that they can participate in this new paradigm. That's what we have to do. As Thomas Kuhn said, the scientific community never changes its mind. They just die. They just die off, and scientific progress is made one funeral at a time, but we don't have time to keep waiting for that. We've got to accelerate this process. That's what the New Paradigm Institute is here for. That's why we're working day and night to try to set this thing up so that people can participate. Just come to newparadigminstitute.org. Push the button to take action, to get the public hearings held by the Congress, and participate in the training programs that we're going to be providing so everybody can get educated about this.
I have one final question if you have a few
I
moments.
do.
Okay.
I do.
This one is this is a big one, and this one I have to set it up a little bit. You talked earlier about you obviously represented John Mack. You mentioned Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs. I have all of their books behind me.
Yep.
I've read them all, and I have to say some of the stuff that's in there is pretty unsettling. And
Yes.
so the question, the elephant in the room is, if 10% of what's in those books is accurate, it's 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 unsettling. Stephen Greer and Lou Elizondo seem to represent two sort of sides of this conversation that's going on right now. And Stephen Greer has famously said for years that these beings are peaceful and they are just waiting for us to get our own act together. If I don't want to misconstrue Lou's statements, but I think broadly speaking, it's safe to say that his position is things are a little more complicated than that. Um,
Mhm.
David Jacobs was in his work has said that there is a hybrid
Okay.
breeding program and there's all kinds of other stuff going on. People want to know what can we believe here? Where should we be looking, and how do we know what we're looking at is the real situation?
Well, the answer is that's what the New Paradigm Institute is for, is to be able to vet this information and to put it out in an intelligent, honest, balanced way, and put to the people the kind of decisions that are going to need to be made here. We clearly can't trust the deep state people to make the decisions for us. We've got to start making these decisions ourselves. That's why the Catholic Vatican issued the public statement saying that, look, now that we're discovering more and more of these new exoplanets, it's become perfectly clear now that much sooner than we had previously anticipated, we're going to discover life elsewhere in the universe. And so the time has begun for the laity to begin to gather together, to begin to discuss these profoundly important philosophical and theological questions that are confronting us now that we realize that we're not alone in the universe. That's the call that has gone out from the institutions. That's what we need to instigate and get going. And so that, I don't want people being Pollyanna-ish about this. I don't want people to say, oh, good, they're all going to come down and they're going to save us. They're going to cure cancer. They're going to give us an alternative source of energy so that we don't have to burn fossil fuels. They're going to, give us some new means so we don't need nuclear power. That there's all kinds of positions. And fortunately, I've talked to all of them. I've actually, you got the books. I talked to the guys, and I get to cross-examine them because I was the lawyer. And so I was putting it to them, what about all this? That the people are coming down and kidnapping women. The classic archetype, oh, they're kidnapping our women, and not only that, but they're impregnating them, and so we can't stand for that. We've got to fight these people. But I don't believe that Stephen Greer on the one hand and Lou Elizondo represent the antipodes of this particular debate. What I disagree with Stephen on and have is that I don't believe that the national security state people, as nefarious as they are, and I might add that I'm much more aware of their nefariousness than possibly Stephen is, even because I've dealt with them, for 50 years. That I don't believe that they're going to try to fabricate a false flag attack. I don't believe that they're going to take some of these back engineered craft and pretend that they're invading us as an alien species so that they can maintain their control over the national security state and get endless funding for a new round of weapons to fight off the aliens. I don't believe that that's happening. On the other hand, he does assert, as you saw, that they're all friendly. They're going to be really helping us. They're all here to help us. They're just waiting for us to qualify to be citizens of the Galactic Federation and all that. I think that's a little bit Pollyanna-ish. But with regard to Lou, whom I know very well, it isn't that he is saying that the alien civilization actually constitutes an actual military threat to us. What it is that the national security state people believe that if they're not in complete control to establish full spectrum dominance and control militarily of the field of battle, they view anything that threatens that as a national security threat because they conflate national security with their complete dominance. Okay. And so that's clearly not the case anymore. They know that they're not dominant over this technology. And so they feel anxious about it. In fact, one of the things that was the most bizarre for Lou is when he was pushing to try to get at more and more information, he couldn't understand why the hierarchy in the military wasn't more worried about this. They got UFOs coming down in Montana and shutting off all 10 of the Minuteman nuclear missiles, just shutting them down, and aircraft carriers, the undersea UFOs coming up and shutting down an entire nuclear aircraft carrier, cutting off all of its communications. It's laying there dead in the water, for an hour without any capacity to communicate with anybody. Now people who are trained their entire life to be military people, that makes their hair stand on end, and they say, oh, this is the worst kind of threat we can possibly imagine. But it's not. The extraterrestrial civilization has not, in fact, demonstrated that they want to seize control of our planet, to come in and raid our resources, any of those traditional colonial type things. That none of that is true. And that isn't what Lou means when he's talking about there being a potential national security threat. He's talking about that former perception It's over matching our technology. And so therefore we view it as a threat. So I don't believe that they are the two antipodes of this conversation. I think and I don't necessarily want to encourage a dialectic over this issue. But what I'm saying is that what we have to do is come to grips with a whole new paradigm that enables us, most importantly, to realistically and honestly preserve our sense of self-value in the face of a civilization that has people that probably have lived for 8 billion more years than we have, and that have settled some of these major cosmological questions that we still have, basic theological questions that we still have, that we want to be able to share in this information in the most positive and constructive way that we possibly can. And we still need to maintain credibly our value as sentient beings. That's the challenge that we have, okay? And that the people at the antipodes of that particular discussion are the ones who believe that if in fact we realize that there are entire civilizations that are literally billions of years more advanced than we are in almost every way, including in consciousness, that we're going to completely collapse as a species, that we'll stop multiplying. What's the use? If we can't dominate the entire universe, what's the point? That's one end of the spectrum, and the other end of the spectrum is, that it's okay possibly for us to become part of the Borg, that we lose our own individual consciousness and we realize that we're all part of one major unified consciousness, and that we lose our individuality, we lose our independent sovereignty. These are the antipodes of a potential dialectic that we want to try to overcome. We don't want this dialectic to set in and have this be a political issue of people fighting with each other over this. We're trying to get an objective new paradigm institute stood up in Washington, D.C., where it can dialogue with our elected representatives, but at the same time can reach out through the electronic means that we have here to all of our people. Anybody who has a cell phone, anybody who has a laptop, or who has a friend who has a laptop or a cell phone, can get this information from the New Paradigm Institute. Our job is to put all of that together. And I know personally, virtually all the people that are still alive, that are involved in this process. I know what their backgrounds are. I know what their prejudices are. I know what their strengths and weaknesses are. And so I'm trying to provide some kind of service as counsel to this movement, to have an institute that can bring all of these people together and vet this information and produce information in a constructive, positive way to our people to exercise our democratic power inside the most powerful nation in the world, to be able to play a constructive role in moving our entire human civilization into this new era of the post-contact era, so that we can have positive and mutually beneficial relations with the extraterrestrial civilization. This is not science fiction anymore. You're not in Kansas anymore. That we have to realize that we're in a larger universe and we're one of a number of many tens of millions of species, and we need to figure out what our proper place is.
Danny, this has been a fascinating conversation. I thank you so much for the time that you've given me. I asked for an hour and a half, and you've given me so much more, and it's been extremely enlightening. For the listeners and viewers, what is the single one thing you would ask them to do going forward to make some forward progress here?
Easy. Contact newparadigminstitute.org. Contact us, push the button to take action, and get the information will flow immediately to your congresspeople and senators to hold these hearings, and it'll give you access to our regular communications that we're setting up to provide this information to you. I'm right across the room here. I'm working on the 100 facts that you need to know first of all about the whole UFO and extraterrestrial phenomenon. Here that you can take these to the bank. These are established, and here's the document proof to show that they're true. Okay, and so let's get started together on this process. Let's move together. So just reach out and there's not any reason why everybody who listens to this, even if they only listen to the first 2 minutes, the problem of our kids, that if you get past 48 seconds, they stop watching it. We got to get people adequately involved in this process to watch a whole show like this and realize that you need to reach out to the newparadigminstitute.org and get on board. And that there's no reason why you shouldn't demand that your congressmen and senators have the hearings on this. There's no reason that you shouldn't want to have the information, which we'll provide to you for free. So just go do it.
Danny, I'll leave it there. That was outstanding. Thank you and your team for fighting the good fight, and we'll do our best on this end to spread the word.
Far out. Thank you so much, Clint. I appreciate it. I love the opportunity to. You can see how reluctant I am to have these long conversations. So just come on and get in touch with us, and we'll all do this together.
Outstanding. Danny, I'll let you get back to it. You have much work to do, and hopefully we'll talk again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Clint. I appreciate it.